Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to start this evening's proceedings. Charles Jenks, who isn't here, has asked me to introduce John Miller and COLQUHOUN, both of whom are probably so well known to all of you they don't need any introduction at all. However, I will say just a brief word. Alan, I understand, started his architectural training before the war, and then after his wartime service, that was in Edinburgh, after his wartime service he competed at the AA, worked at the LCC for a while, doing the Bentham Road scheme, which was the sort of partner of the Roehampton scheme, characterized by sort of Corbusian slab blocks. After that, it was a period with Candelis in Paris, and then Lyons, Israel and Ellis, which seemed to have gone through a period which contained a great many people. And during that time, he was working at Lyons, Israel and Ellis with John Miller, who was also there. John did his training after the war, the same time about that I did, which proves that he must be a young architect, and then went on to work with Leslie Martin, and then joined up with Alan COLQUHOUN in partnership, I think about 12 years ago. So what they will be showing you now, I think, is the achievement of 12 years of practice, and with that I think I'll hand over the floor to them.
Thank you, Neve. Like this? Okay, here we go. The work we're going to show you tonight is a selection of work. I think it's done over the last 15 years, actually. I think it's right. And comprises, I think it's six or so jobs, which we hope characterize the certain objectives of our work. A famous statesman once said that in any talk you really should restrict your points to perhaps 2 or maybe 3 at the very most. Otherwise, things get out of hand. This is very difficult for an architect because buildings, I think, always engage many ideas, and it's a temptation, therefore, to digress and engage discussion on several levels. But for the purpose of this talk tonight, Alan and I have oriented the proposition towards 2 aspects. The first is to do with hierarchy, which has been a primary interest of ours since we started up. And secondly, an interrelated aspect, which is the idea of, I can find my notes, kind of volumetric planning. These 2 propositions are we think, exhibited in these projects we have to show you. After I've made this brief introduction, then Alan will discuss the first 2 jobs, and I will then take over the last couple or so. Now, on this question of our interest in hierarchy, I think the point I would make is that, in our view, such hierarchies arrive not so much as out of a brief, but more usually out of a selection of an appropriate plan type, which, by a process of discussion and elimination, one selects so that it can comfortably coexist with the empirical requirements of the particular brief. This idea, or this attitude, puts forward the notion that the hierarchy is more important than programmatic requirements which are liable to change, and are also the result of perhaps an accident of a particular moment in time. And if they're celebrated and fixed, then they become exaggerated in their importance. Now, although the projects we're going to show are of very different building technology, they vary an awful lot over the years because as a result of many things, including economic pressures, we've oscillated between traditional masonry construction to steel structures and whatnot, all sorts of things. This is partly in response to an economic situation, partly in response to our own interests. And on that point, I think we would say that our choice of a technology is more a question of the appropriate one rather than it be high or low or whatever you want to call it, you know. Now, going back to this question of hierarchy, as I say, each building broadly corresponds to this notion, and we achieve it by establishing, usually, a general context which allows for particularity in the principal parts, and therefore those which can be considered special or public, if you like. I think perhaps this is the moment to switch on this machine. I get the right one. Let's go the wrong way. Do you have the lights out? Yes. The drawing on the left, which looks as though it's come out of the archive, covered in patina as it is the first job we did, which is Forest Gate High School. And that on the right is a recent building, Melrose Avenue Activity Centre. The one on the left is a masonry building, the one on the right is a steel frame building with cladding, which we will talk about more later. But in both, there is a similar preoccupation, albeit the one on the left is to do with the coincidence between structure and the spaces, and the one on the right, being a frame building, allows a certain amount of loose fit in terms of the functions, but both address themselves this business of hierarchy and priority. In Forest Gate, for example, the context of the building is established by the classrooms, which is this L-shaped container, and which encompass and grip the communal parts of the building, which is the hall and the library, stage, and small hall. That is hall, stage, small hall, and library over it. And then these, in turn, inflect the spaces which are contained by the whole figure. In the case of this much smaller building on the right, this activity centre, the lower space is the communal hall for this activity centre, which is a euphemism, I think, for a village hall, really. But one of these dreadful modern expressions which one has to deal with these days. And the peripheral L, as it were, are the special kind of private functions which support the space. And without their existence, in both cases, there would be no container for the hall. It would be, it exists as a dependent upon its container. And similarly, if one goes on to later jobs. This is again is Forest Gate, and the one on the right is Holloway College, chemistry building. The building on the right, the chemistry building, makes the principal laboratory spaces on the ground floor by the matrix of the stuff over it. These big roof lights actually are related to large heating spaces underneath. And if you were to lift off the top floor, there would be precious little to contain the volume of these large labs. So that one idea is contingent upon the other. This on the left is our first job again, Forest Gate High School, and that on the right is a later school, Clifton Cannon Lee in Yorkshire. The one on the left, again, exhibits this thing I was proposing just now. That is to say, here's the library, the small hall, the hall, and the classrooms. You can see that if you strip it off, there's no container for it, so that the one is dependent upon the other. And much can be said of the other building on the right. In both these two cases, and also in the case of the activity centre, this coincides with what can be considered private functions, that is to say the classroom areas and ancillaries, and public functions, those which are communal and are in some way symbolic of the essence of the school or schools. This is illustrations of, on the left, Forest Gate, and on the right, the chemistry labs. And with the slide on the right, you can see that the grey area above, this is to say these strips of material here, actually form the container for these semi-public, big generalized laboratories, which are the teaching laboratories below. Now that, I think, is concludes the introduction. But just to say one thing, even it's nice. Oh, that's it. Yes. I was going to say one more thing. Even when you're dealing with a small problem like a house, similar preoccupations can be enjoyed, and that in the little house on the right, the same preoccupation exists. That is to say that here, in this area in front, as it were, in the glazed area, exists the living rooms and so on, the more public part of the house, and the rear part, both the top level and the lower level, one gets the private functions, bedrooms and so on, and the two elements thereby are locked together. This is a different idea than to a string of beans, In the case of the labs, which Alan will now expand upon, this principle of volumetric planning, as it were, has an advantage insofar as it permits a large-scale module of pieces. That is to say, you get a series of T's here, and associated smaller laboratories to the sides, which are a trigger, as it were, for any possible extension, which at the time we designed and built this building, we assumed might happen. It's perhaps somewhat doubtful whether the building will extend in the way one anticipated, but the intention at the time was that these components, this principle involving a large-scale module as a result of observations of volumetric planning could allow that to occur. And this will be demonstrated in the axometrics and plans which follow on. Now, Alan is going to take you through in detail Forest Gate and Holloway College, and then we will do a sort of Box and Cox act with the other jobs. I just put this on you. There we are.
You press the right hand one?
The right hand one is the forward one. That's
Okay. Well, this is going back again to Forest Gate High School, which was our first job. It's in what used to be West Ham and is now Newham. And it's a straightforward secondary modern school for girls and boys. I think there's a site plan which perhaps I ought to show. No. Well, the site plan was really indicated on the axonometrics that John showed just now. It's a very small site, and one of its characteristics was that it was intersected by a public footpath, which we couldn't, which had to be left intact. So the site, in fact, consisted of two sites, one large and one small, and the small one was a strange triangular shape, and is on the left of the plan that you see. Because of the restricted site, we decided to build as high as possible, compatible with convenient use of the school. And this, in fact, we thought would result in a three-story building. And owing to this public footpath that bisects the site, one of the essential ingredients of the brief was that we should be able to move easily from one side of the site to the other. And furthermore, in the future, there would be a further extension, which we were going to locate on the smaller side of the site, which was another reason why we would have to, in some way, bridge over this public footpath. This was, I suppose, the primary reason why we decided, the primary practical reason why we decided to have the main circulation of the school on the first floor. Because, of course, there were also formal reasons for doing this, because in so doing, one was able to create a principal floor which was equidistant from the other two floors, and so somewhat reduce the feeling of the three-story building. It also gave us another formal element to play with in which to put specific programmatic elements. This is the ground floor. The plan on the left is the ground floor, and as John explained before, the classrooms wrap around on the outside, and the central space is the assembly room with its adjacent small hall and stage. Well, basically those are on the first floor, and the ground floor consists of a large store which is about 6'5", 6'6" high, in the centre under the assembly hall. And under the stage and the small hall, which are slightly raised from the assembly hall, we have the main entrances with their locker rooms and coat hanger, that kind of thing. And this is where the students actually enter the building through these in these positions there, underneath the stage in the small hall. There is a truncated L of classrooms on the ground floor, and the extreme ends consist of covered play spaces, which are under special classrooms on the first and second floor, which are the art rooms and science rooms, classrooms which are bigger than the other ones and which require special servicing, and therefore should be grouped together. There's a kind of binuclear organization in this school, which a lot of things seem to fit into. There is a division. The entrances are divided between the girls and boys, which is a completely sort of a non-ideological decision on our part. It was simply useful to have as a further extension of this binuclear idea, and it was in fact a requirement that the headmaster at that time wanted. But of course there's no reason why it should be maintained in the least. In addition, on this floor, in addition to the entrances, you get a dining room here, which is associated with the kitchen there. And then also there are lavatories, which are entered straight off the hard play areas at the ends there and there. And the two main staircases go from the ground floor to the third floor in those corners. And these four staircases lead only from the ground floor to the floor of the assembly hall, which is about 7 foot above the ground floor level.
I often missed the loss of the plans on it.
It's back.
That's right.
Now this is the principal floor, the first floor, and I'm sorry, I'll probably be obscuring it from people on the right. These are the special classrooms at the ends, which are over the covered play spaces. This is the assembly hall. Now the point about this first floor circulation is that because it's the first floor, it becomes the most frequently used level of circulation. And in order to circulate from one end of the building to the other, if you're going from one classroom to another, you actually have to pass through the hall. And you pass through the hall, not through the center of the hall, but along a raised gallery, which is actually at first floor level, which is about 3 foot high, 3 or 4 feet higher than the level of the assembly hall itself. And you can circulate right round the assembly hall. And this has an added advantage which in fact was made use of by the English master there, who controlled the sort of looked after dramatic performances in the school. That it could be used as a theatre in the round. It could be used either as a conventional theatre with the stage here and the audience in the assembly hall and more audience sitting round there, or the whole thing could be reversed. And the audience could go on the stage, and the hall could be used for acting. And the lights were organized so that they could be moved quite easily and adjusted to the required positions. This actually worked quite well. We saw a performance of theatre in the round, which was quite successful. Then this corner here, which is over the dining room and the kitchen, is the main entrance to the school, to which you approach from the outside. There's a flight of steps leads up to the first floor there. The entrance to the side, which isn't shown on this drawing, see it there, that's the actual side boundary along there. And there's a gate here, which a sort of porch, which you actually go through. And you arrive up here, and you arrive almost in the center of the school, and you immediately see the space of the hall. Then here's the bridge which leads to the other side of the site. The footpath runs underneath here and was intended to lead to the extension, which would have been a separate pavilion on 2 stories. And there's a further bridge here which leads to the gymnasium, 2 gymnasiums at this corner of the building. In fact, the accommodation in this block here consists of workshops in the ground floor, and and 2 gymnasia, one over the other, one for girls and one for boys. And this actually enabled one to get the noisy areas isolated from the school, but also it enabled us to complete this notional volume which the school actually, the building actually, in the theory, consisted of, and provided the feeling that in these areas here, you were actually inside the building with no roof. So the environment of the building really starts along these lines here, and this is emphasized by the treatment of the surface of these courtyards, which were in red tiles, a similar colour to the red brick of the building.
Yeah, next one.
Then the third floor is very similar to the second floor. It has a gallery which interconnects all the classrooms, and actually, again, you have to pass by the hall, and we wanted this open, but the fire regulations necessitated having it glazed in. However, you can actually see down, although you can't hear. So again, you have this always this connection with the core of the building, which you actually have to pass through in getting from one place to another. This is the library, which is perched up over the small hall. This is the upper part of the stage. And there are staff rooms here. And the main staff room actually has a corner window looking back onto the hall, which is curious enough, is a feature of some 19th century board schools we discovered later, where the staff rooms have kind of peepholes onto the main assembly hall. This is the upper one of the two gymnasia. That's an elevation which is the elevation of the entrance approach to the school. These two sides are very, very plain and simple, with strip windows and cross walls expressed in a rather low-key way. Whereas when you approach it from this direction, the building is very cut up and broken up into elements. And of course, you never actually see that elevation, because you're never far enough away to get that impression. But you do get a feeling of the elements separating out. These are just a few photographs. We haven't got any good photographs of this building, unfortunately. The ones we had taken were lost. That just gives a general impression from the hard play area on the site. That was the gymnasium block, and the end of one of the L's classrooms, and then that is the wall of the stage. On the right is a view of the assembly hall, and there are a series of views now of the assembly hall, which I'll go through quite quickly. Yes, I think if we could stop here, one of the interesting things about the assembly hall is that the roof is entirely independent of the rest of the structure, so that you get this strip of light around the roof to the assembly hall, which corresponds to the corridor, to the gallery route of the building. This actually is the gallery at first floor level, which is about 4 foot higher than the level of the assembly hall itself. So there's this strip of light which throws light against this wall and articulates the space of the assembly hall itself from the gallery which runs around it. There you see the corners. That actually is the window to the staff common room. That, on the correspondingly opposite corner, is one of the two staircases, which actually form part of the space of the hall itself. We had a lot of trouble with the fire escape people, but eventually we found a solution to that, which satisfied them. Okay. That's just another photograph of the hall from a slightly different position. There you see the short flights of steps leading up from the entrances and cloakrooms. The sequence of operation when you go to school is that you first of all go and say prayers in the hall. So I mean, whether it's prayers or not, the thing is that the first event is a kind of collective event. So it makes sense to be able to come up in a kind of vomitorium straight up onto the main assembly floor, and then later on, when they disperse to their classrooms, they go up, they have a choice of any one of the four corners to go up a further short flight to the first floor level. Or, of course, they could go down back again to the classrooms on the ground floor. That's another view showing the back of the stage and one of the two entrance systems of entrance doors. Yep. That's a view of the hall. As you emerge from the ground floor, you come up into the space. That view is taken, I think, from the staircase, one of the staircases in the corners. There you see the gallery, the gallery at the second floor, on the third level, running around there. We wanted to have that open, as I said, because it seemed that it would be rather nice if you had stage performances for people to actually look down from the upper galleries as well, but it wasn't possible to do that. But at least we kept the visual connection. That's a shot of the library, which is now completely changed inside. It's just the library was a double-height space with a gallery constructed of timber with plywood facing, which was also contained the bookshelves. So there was a kind of inner skin of woodwork inside the library. It was lit from high level along one side, over the top of the assembly hall.
No, sorry.
I think we're going back to it. That's that. Well, that's all that we've got at Forest Gate High School, which the point about those slides was that they would illustrate the points that John made earlier on about the essentially simple relationship which we try to set up between the public part of the building and the more private parts. This is Royal Holloway College, which is a chemistry building. This is the building we did after the Forest Gate High School. It was completed in about 1972. 69. It was completed in 69-70. The site is on the Southampton Road, just outside Egham. Probably some of you know this enormous building here, red brick building, which is a sort of pastiche of the chateaux of the Loire, Chambord, I think, and it's a vast building. There was a film made in it on television a short time ago. And the chemistry building is more or less in that position there. It's a 90-acre site, very, very large, very beautiful site on the slope, with lots of trees, very wooded. And the site development was originally going to take place as a unified concept to be developed by Sir Leslie Martin. For various reasons, this didn't work out, and luckily for us, I suppose, the various buildings in the complex were dealt with by different architects. Unfortunately, this meant that there was complete chaos, in fact, on the site because of the incompatibility of the various buildings, not only the incompatibility of style of various buildings, but the absurd way in which they were related to each other, due to the fact that there wasn't any overall control. The only control we had was over our particular building. However, one of the original conditions of the program, which was that the building should be low and should be able to extend in as many directions as possible. And this we made one of the sort of starting points of our solution. This is the building, in fact, as it was built. and it was capable of extension either sideways or at the bottom or at the top. And this drawing actually shows an extension at the top. And I think there's another drawing just now which shows the extension, potential extension at the side. One of the reasons why we organized the building as we did, or I should say the sort of trade-off of our conception of buildings, which is that it should consist of a hierarchy of spaces rather than a kind of solidification of specific functional or programmatic requirements, is that in fact a same building could conceivably serve many different kinds of functions. And somewhere at the back of our mind was the idea of a building which can extend and which can house more than one particular function. It might be something else than chemistry building. That's for the overall conception, though as you'll see, the detailed design is very much geared to the special requirements of a highly serviced chemistry laboratory. Just to reiterate what John said about the basic formal concepts, these light wells here let light into the major undergraduate laboratories, which extend. Could we go back to the one just before?
I'll try.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's it. This is the building as it is, in fact, and I'm sure it'll never be any different, because things don't happen ever the way you expect them to happen. The undergraduate laboratories occur at the ground level underneath these light wells, and they're organized from side to side. You can see out at the ends, but the ends don't in fact provide much light. The light is provided by these light wells. But on top of the undergraduate laboratories, there is a kind of network of other provisions of a slimmer, skinnier kind. The first type is this T of postgraduate laboratories. There were, I think, six of these. We had provided six. And provided 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And at the ends of the arms of these T's were double-banked strips of professors' laboratories and offices and various ancillary rooms. Now, as you see, the building, the ground slopes quite steeply, and the building, in fact, breaks every third bay down one floor. There are various sort of effects this has. One of the effects is that it enables the undergraduates and postgraduates, who basically are working on the ground floor and the first floor respectively, to mingle much more than they otherwise would do. And this was a specific requirement of the program, because what is the ground floor at this point becomes the first floor at that point, and you simply walk straight along on the same level, and you move from an undergraduate department to a postgraduate department. Would you like to go on?
Yes. No,
Right.
if you move, I think we should keep them on.
Go on. Okay. So, describing the plan. The lowest level of plan is the service entrance here, the store here. Two sort of dangerous laboratories are liable to explosion, which had to be outside the building there, and the workshops along there. Then going up one floor, this is the lower of the two pairs of undergraduate laboratories with their ancillary rooms along the right-hand side, and a vertical circulation core which goes up through four stories and links the main service storage with the various laboratories. Then, something's happened to that one. Yes. Well, anyhow, this is the next floor. And what happens? You see, really, the building is divided into two parts: that part and that part. And this part is an exact repeat of the part below. So here again, you get the two undergraduate laboratories with their ancillary buildings. And in this case, the link to the central core of services is at that point there. These are the postgraduate laboratories, research laboratories, and these are the ancillary rooms attached to them. That's it. Now, going up one further floor, you arrive at ground level on at the entrance end of the building. And this is connected to a pedestrian mall. Basically, the site is organized on a Radburn principle with pedestrian circulation down the middle and a peripheral road for private cars and service vehicles. And this mall, in fact, bisects the whole site and bifurcates at a certain point and links all the principal buildings on the site. So it constitutes the main entrance to this building. And this, in fact, is the main entrance hall. And you go up and down half a floor by means of ramp to either of the two available floors at that level, which is, if you go half up, you get to a research level, and if you go half down, you get to an undergraduate level. And at this level here, you can see that there's a connection underneath the now. This is one level lower than that, between the main building and the two lecture halls. Now, our idea originally was that these two lecture halls would form the nucleus of a further extension in this direction, which was shown on one of those axonometrics I showed just now. So that eventually these lecture halls, which are roof-lit, in the same way that the undergraduate laboratories are roof-lit, would actually take on exactly the same relationship to the surrounding accommodation as the laboratories themselves do. So this is an example of where a form does not actually correspond with a use, but it corresponds with a type of use, that's to say with a collective use. I think one more floor, is it? This side. Well, the top floor is missing, but the top floor consists of rather special accommodation, principally a library, which is detached from the main structural system of the rest of the school, and forms a kind of porte cochere under which you enter. And it also dominates the entrance side, as you see from here. That's the mall running along there. And the library, which doesn't announce its function in a clear way. All it's saying is that it is an important part of the building, which is not organically connected to the rest of it, which is somewhat separate. Then these two wings were the two wings that ultimately were to have extended up the hill. This is the side view showing we're showing this model because it actually is very diagrammatic and illustrates one's themes rather better than the building itself. And this shows how how the building slopes down the site. The circulation of the building is down the two sides and follows the slope in the site on two levels, like that. And you can see that you can change your departments, as it were, by simply walking on the same level. Another advantage, of course, of the slope was it enabled one to get a feeling of the outside more frequently. All of these rooms, of course, face over the countryside there. And so there's a considerable amount of penetration of outside space into the building. Connected with that, another thing we did was to create a covered gallery on both sides of the building, partly because some of the students come from Egham, which is down the hill, and would enter the building from the bottom and not the top. Also, there are entrances, direct entrances and escape exits up the side of the building on both sides. And all these routes are connected to this covered walkway which goes up the building, which also enables the building to relate more satisfactorily with the ground outside, because you get a kind of intermediate zone between the outside space and the inside space, which is the covered zone of the gallery. Now, about the specific requirements of the building, which were particular requirements of this particular building, as opposed to general solution types. The first one was that it's a very heavily service building, so one had to somehow make a decision about the way in which the servicing distribution related to the structure. There were two basic choices. One either made a service level, in which case the services would be more or less detached from the structure. But this turned out to be very wasteful in terms of volume. So we decided to canalize the services, and this involved actually splitting the structure, both vertically and horizontally. And all the services, both the piped services, that's compressed air, water, oxygen, and so on, were distributed through these through the split structure, as well as the warm air heating. So this really gives the characteristic form of the building is determined partly by this requirement for integration of services and structure. The module of the building is 3 meters from center to center of paired structure. As to say, you get 1 meter. The little bay is 1 meter, and then there's 2 meters, and then 1 meter again. That gives an optimal distance between benches. This leads me to the second specific requirement of the building, which was that it should be in some way flexible. I mean, this wasn't made very, very clear, but it was obvious that they required both the possibility of extension, which I think that John and I have dealt with, and also the possibility of change on a micro level. And in order to satisfy this, we chose this rather close distribution of services, which would enable any fitting of any kind to be plugged on to any column, any pairs of column in the building. So that the flexibility or the adaptability didn't lie in a technical solution like dry partitions that could be easily demounted, but in the actual configuration of the service distribution, because we reckoned that the problem of moving block walls isn't very great. What's absolutely critical is that whatever degree of adaptation you make, you should always have the services at the point where you expect them and need them. This illustrates the split structure. The ducts and the pipes go horizontally between the split beams and vertically between the split columns. We also have fume hoods which discharge through the split columns. There's drawing. The section really illustrates the organizational principle of the building, the repeating element, the repeating large-scale element, which is that. So that in principle, all you have to do is to add another unit of that sort, and the concept of the building remains intact in spite of alterations. That's on the large scale. That's alterations of a large scale. Alterations of the small scale, of course, wouldn't affect the feeling of the building and the overall structure of the building at all, because what gives the grain of the building is actually this universal double split structure, and the exact position of partitions within defined areas is not important. Yeah, well, that's just another view showing the split structure. These are views of the main entrance. That's the library there, and the two wings of the building which can extend in this direction on either side of the library. The main entrance there, the now running across there between the building and the lecture halls. It's just a nighttime view of the same thing. Sorry, could we go back to that second? In the nighttime view, what's quite interesting is that you see the circulation system inside. You can see the way the ramps distribute you not only from the centre of the building to the side, but also from one level to half a level up or down. These I'll go through very quickly. This is just a perambulation of the building. This is the library again, the main entrance, which this is before the ground was properly laid out, before the building was completed or handed over. The mall actually runs, the pedestrian mall actually runs between there and is projected into by the library columns. There we're beginning to move around the building. That's on the extreme right you see the library. Another view, more or less the same direction. And that's the side of the building from the same quarter.
Can you focus it? Because I'm having trouble with the machine.
You can focus it.
You can't, you know. No. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is going further down the side. This is shown, but this is before the building was handed over. But it's quite a good. It shows quite well actually the way the overlapping levels fit together, and also the fact that you can just see the staircase inside the building is echoed by a staircase outside the building in the covered way. So there's a kind of parallel movement system inside or outside the building. Right down at the bottom of the site, at the lowest point, the workshops are half sunk into the ground, and you can't see it, but the actual service entrance is along there. And the next slide will show you the view from the service entrance. The service entrance is in fact dug into the ground, and that serves the workshops and also the stores, chemical stores. On the right, you see the glazing to the in the bottom, the ancillary rooms on the left, and the roof glazing to the workshops on the right. There's another view of the workshops from the other side. That's a more distant view in the same direction. These grass mounds in the foreground are those dangerous buildings that we had to build outside the main building. Now we're approaching the other side of the building and going up it. That's just one of the studies we made while we were designing it. That's a more distant view of the bottom end of the building, which shows the way these the steps actually form from a fair distance. They actually form quite an important kind of formal organisation. Now we're back at the top again. This has got out of sequence somehow, but that's again at the bottom, the workshops there. And this is where you approach the building if you're coming from Egham. And you go up those stairs and you follow on up. And you can enter the building at any point you wish. That's again under the library, the main entrance under the library. It's a very splendid site with lovely trees. That's one of the staircases which follow the fall of the ground, the main distribution staircases in the building. That's difficult to explain what that is. It's the link between the library and the main building, in fact. There are short passerelles which lead from the main building to the library. And the library is on the left. And on the left of the lower level is the entrance hall. That's another view of the entrance, showing the distribution system inside. And that's another view of the outside staircase, which follows the inside staircase. And these are a series of views of the ramps.
I don't know what's happened.
They somehow got slightly out of order. On the right is the ramps, and rather in the same way as at Forest Gate High School, the space between the library and the main structure, like the space between the roof of the assembly hall and the main structure, is covered by roof lights, which also which are a reflection of the width of two ramps going up and down. Another view of the ramps. It's looking down the ramps, one of the ramps, into the entrance hall. And that's looking up, slightly mysterious photograph, looking up, as you emerge from the lower ramp into the entrance hall. It's the same. That's looking through the glass to the main entrance. These are shots close up to the side of the building, showing the external staircases. That's the covered walkway up the sides of the building. And this on the left is one of these two shots of the undergraduate laboratories. We designed all the, we were lucky really to be able to design all the fittings. The benches were standard benches, but we modified them considerably. And all those sort of ancillary fittings we designed, including the light fitting, something which would be quite out of the question today with costs as they are now. These light fittings were specially designed. On the right is one of the lecture halls, the larger of the two lecture halls. That is the roof structure of the lecture hall. This has electrically controlled blinds, which give blackout when required. Here you can see the distribution, the warm air distribution there. We actually designed a table of elements for them, but we haven't got a photograph of it. That's the library there, which has, the only window it has actually looks into the building over the ramps. The other lighting is from the roof. This is the escape, exit, or last-minute entry into one of the lecture halls. That shows the inclined roof light over the ramps from the outside, and that shows it from the inside, with the library on the left. There's a detail of that junction. That's another view of the over the ramps. Originally we wanted to have clear glass in the roof lights, but we found we couldn't do it because of the, I think it was because of basically because of cost. But in the end we decided it was rather nice to have them opaque because it forced you to look down onto the entrance and back into the building. These are just odd views of the ramps, of the main staircases and the external staircases in the covered way. I think the one on the left shows rather well the kind of relationship it has to this site. Yep.
That's all.
Well, that's all the Holloway. This is a small extension we did in York. Here again, the spatial preoccupations are rather similar to the ones we've had before. In this case, it's the gymnasium that forms the core of the building, and the classrooms wrap around the gymnasium. And the section which John showed before illustrated that the height of the gymnasium was equivalent to 2 floors, so the roof actually goes straight the way across. So from here to there, you get the roof extends from there to there. This is just circular. That's where it links onto the existing building. This is a entrance direct into this from the playground. And these are classrooms. These are light. This is the lower floor. So these are preparation rooms, because these are science classrooms. That's the upper floor, showing 2 light wells there, which have roof lights over them, so that you do get light into the ground floor at those points there. There's a main staircase there and a secondary staircase at that end. And this is simply a viewing area where they can watch the people in the gymnasium. This was in fact, yes, this is a longitudinal section showing the 2 staircases. That's an elevation classroom. This was a steel structure, and one of the requirements was that we should be built as quickly as possible. And in fact, the steel structure went up in less than a fortnight. But everything else was so slow that it didn't make any difference at all. It just was been built in brick. But it was our first exercise, actually, in designing in steel, with as many dry. Just was been built in brick. But it was our first exercise, actually, in designing in steel, with as many dry construction elements as possible. That's the gymnasium on the right. That's just, that's a special design, that roof structure. It's not just a standard space frame or anything. This is the rear of the building, and that's its connection with the existing building. There. We used polychrome in this building, partly to overcome the confusion which we found was caused by the extremely sort of frantic expression of the structure, which resulted from using this kind of construction. And we made quite a few mistakes, actually, in the way of how we would express the structure in relation to the walls. Here you can see the way the structure disappears into that wall, which was something which we couldn't avoid, but which we didn't very much like. And the colour was to some extent an attempt to overcome things that we consider to be design faults. However, the colour is quite successful. They're terrible slides. I'm afraid they give no indication of the actual effect of the colour at all. We used standard castellated beams in the classrooms. Okay. Now this is a building which is just about to start, actually, although it's been on the drawing boards for nearly 3 years. It's an old people's home, and it's on a terribly awkward site. There's a motorway there, and a high street there, there's another road there. Old people's homes always get the worst possible sites. However, they've decided now they're not going to turn it into a motorway. They're going to leave it as it is. So the sound problems along this place are not so acute as they would have been. But the difficulties of the site account for the plan configuration. Although, again, what we've tried to do here is to unify the plan by creating a central space which in fact is a combination of entrance hall and main sitting lounge. And this central space looks out onto the road. And this is the first floor. The principal organization of the home is something which was laid down by Haringey Borough Council and ultimately by the Ministry, was that it should be broken up into four sort of houses, or flatlets as they call them. So that you have two, one on each other there, and two one on the other there, comprising four more or less self-contained houses with these very, very small bed-sitting rooms, which the old people get turfed out from at 6:30 in the morning, not allowed back there till 9 at night. They're really terrible places. And we're trying to make the best of a very bad job in terms of sort of the human conditions in which exist in these old people's homes and the constraints of cost. One new thing which we were asked to introduce was that we get each of these houses, in fact, has its own little centre where they take their meals. This produces problems of food distribution, but they think that they're going to try and make it work. So that it might do something to ameliorate the effect that you normally get in these old people's homes, where during the daytime there's one room in the building where everybody is sitting watching television, which is the main hall. That's all they all go. They either sleep or watch television. So at least they have a choice of places where they can go, and hopefully they can even go to a neighbouring house and visit somebody else in their own common room. Whether this is going to work in practice, I don't know, because of the disciplines which the staff have to impose. Okay. No, I think it's yours. So I'll hand over to John now, who will deal with the last three buildings.
Could you put these two wheels in the carousel? That might be an idea. I think in the question they would rhyme.
Yes. Are there any queries on what I've said? Yes.
I noticed these paving pattern in the chemistry room. It's a very related to the building itself. Did you design a paving?
Yes. There were special pavings. They were on the module of the building. That's those days 1'8" by 3'4", half metre by 1 metre. We actually found somebody to make them quite cheaply.
I'm not sure which one is which, actually. That's right. The last three jobs we'll show you tonight are a house which wasn't built, a holiday house which was built, and this activity centre which was also built in Milton Keynes. The two slides on the screen are the immediate landscape for the two houses. They're sited in the most extreme southwesterly point in Cornwall, on the Thal estuary, and the one on the left is the view to the estuary, which is sort of way out here, and the one on the right is sort of looking back up the creek. This shore here is the edge of the site. This is approximately southwest in that direction. The context of the site is a curious one. Cornish coastline, as you probably know, has become, in many cases, suburbanized. And you get this proliferation of villas and cottages and so on. And in spite of that, we had considerable difficulty with the planning authorities as to what we were proposing to do. Damn it. Yes. So here is the creek. The estuary is out to the bottom of the screen. This is the house, the holiday house, which is built, and this is the projected house, which is the model on the left shows, which unfortunately was delayed, permanently delayed. This is the model of Pilwood House, which was built. On the right here, we have the house for this client of ours, who unfortunately, very bitter about it actually, turned it down finally because he felt it was too small for his needs. But even in this project, although it's much smaller scale than the other things you've seen, we had similar kinds of obsession with the spatial organization. Obviously with a house you've got much less material to make these kinds of gesture. But here we have a slight fall very steeply towards the water. And we have a retaining wall along the top here, up against which the house is positioned, and that makes this external space, which is a continuation of the living area, and is, as I said earlier, it's a way of creating a volume by dint of putting these two pieces together, the wall and the enclosure. The plan is very straightforward. As far as you have a garage entrance, down some steps here, door, into the living space, a kitchen which favors onto this, a small study come workroom, two bathrooms, one for the master bedroom and one for a divisible children's guest room here. The whole roof being top-lit along the back here against the retaining wall. I can't get this right, I'm afraid. Yes. As per this axonometric. Here you have the wall and the roof light and this element which is posited against it, and thereby playing a formal game with that, with the wall. And the terrace from the living space kind of clips round into that sheltered area. The reason for this was not just only a reaction to the site in terms of its formal nature, but also there's a drive here which goes up to the second house, and this splay enabled one to get some kind of privacy for the owner and his family. Now, have I had that one before? Yeah, I have. Oh dear. These are just photographs of the model of that house. And we were interested in also creating making the external space into a room. And that actually, I think, also relates back to Forest Gate right at the beginning. The enclosure of the classrooms and the halls make external spaces which are rooms. And in this case, these openings, which you see through as you come down the upper walk, are, as it were, windows to this outside space. Oh God. Yes, these are more shots of the... Then the drawing on the left is the section of the house, the holiday home, which we've actually built. And on the right, the axiometric of same. This section exhibits this interlocking idea that we've played with in all these jobs. That is that this is the communal, or the relatively communal areas, and the ones tucked in behind are the more or less private functions. They're connected, in this case, with a staircase, spiral staircase up here, and one at the back, which you see indicated by this overhead light and the drum here, which is here. On the upper level, one gets the living space and kitchen and a dining area. And on the lower level, the bedrooms and the children's play space. And the play space connects to the living area. The reason for this was to enable the best advantage of the views of the estuary, this inversion, and exhibits one of the current, continuous rather, problems, I think, that we face actually very often as architects. That is to say that when you want to make something which is slightly more idealized than perhaps practical necessity would require, and given that there's two conditions, I would veer towards the ideal rather than the practical. This may not please the people that use it so much, but I think in fact, it actually gives a plus to the project. Of course, by putting the bedrooms on the lower level and the living room above. Incidentally, that isn't quite as critical as one perhaps should have stated, because the upper floor, because the ground floor, is connected to this terrace, so there is a way in all the way around. This house hasn't got a front door. The front door, as it were, the entrance to the whole compound, is detached at the road, at the back of the site, and it is in a sense like a pavilion in a park, which doesn't make a special demand for particular entrance, but there are many ways of getting into it. In fact, you enter directly into the bedroom spaces on the lower level, as you do in the front here and at the top. Like Holloway, as Alan says. Now, I'm going to mess this up again, I think. These are this slightly earlier plan. We had, in the very first design, we were toying with a straight flag at the front here, because we were a little bit worried about the duplication of the spiral staircase. But I think I'm glad to say that we decided finally to opt for that particular option. We have now a spiral in the front and in the back. And basically the plan is a play of squares, both in plan and section. On the ground floor here, you get three spaces which are bed spaces. They're not really bedrooms, since the division between them are sliding and can be pushed away, which allows a degree of flexibility of use in the daytime. And the fourth of the squares at the back here is the bathroom and storage core, which is approached from the bedroom spaces, and these enter directly from the outside area. These are the children's spaces, these are the adults. And this front area is intended for kind of kids' play space when the weather doesn't allow them to go outside. In the back there's a storage wall which bisects the cylinder. The cylinder which penetrates right the way through the whole house and enters directly into the parents' bedroom, next them up to the living space above. So this is a sort of optional circulation, which means one doesn't have to have the disadvantage of a lot of corridor. One uses this space as circulation, as an optional circulation, rather than you find in French ensuite planning. These are elevations which give you a slightly distorted aspect because, first of all, I think it's a curiosity of all the jobs we've had, but you never get a camera very far away from the building, and one never gets this degree of frontality. One always sees the building in episode, but nevertheless, the geometry of the design is centralized around this notion of a square module, which is produced both in section and in plan. The plan, I think, being 11 foot 1.5 square, and I think these are 3 foot 8.5 in height. No, 7 foot 6, I beg your pardon, in height. And here you get this motif of square windows, sliding windows to the play space in the front. The construction is a steel frame with GRP cladding panels to the flanks and a GRP cylinder for the staircase enclosure and a GRP staircase and to both the staircase and the cylinder, and the one which you just can see here appearing from in front of the this panel here. The steel frame goes up and to engage the roof structure, which is simple patent glazing with glass louvers which are paired to either side of the upper part of the roof and are partnered by a similar pair of glass louvers on this side and then the opposite side at the bottom. This allows a through draft in summertime when it's hot, and you get an extraordinary natural ventilation effect. Then slung between the structure are these blinds which slide on the patent glazing and are left to hang to form a natural catenary curve, which have a certain dynamic quality against the structural system. This is a shot taken just before it was finished, on the left, with certain kind of builder's detritus on the roof still. And at that time, there's no blinds inside. The doors to the bed spaces are all standard aluminium doors in which we put glass louvers in order to avoid the necessity of having a window element and thereby we couple the problem of entrance and exit and ventilation in one element, which is a kind of, I suppose, a contemporary version of a stable door in a sense. These are general shots to the outside. That little round thing in the panel is a ventilator from the bathroom. That's a view from the upper terrace, and that is the corner of the building with a view out to the Fan estuary. We had a lot of discussion about whether we should keep the pine, which I'm glad we did, because it gives a kind of slightly oriental flavour to southwest Cornwall, coupled with the rhododendron, which I believe are natives from China originally. These are details of the staircase and the connection of the building to the rock face. This surface here is the actual rock, which we didn't have to cut into, fortunately, because the site originally had a house on it some years ago, and it was semi-ruinous when we were commissioned. We were able to make use of the plateau of the site with its rock retaining wall at the rear, which is quite nice because it gives a proposition of nature and the machine product adjacent to it. This is a shot of the structure, and I suppose one could say it isn't the most economic way of constructing the house. There might have been other ways of doing it which might have been cheaper, but in terms of getting the maximum out of the space and making something which was as transparent and as effective as one could, we opted for a frame construction of this sort, with the columns detached from the slabs, such that you get a column which runs up a height and a half, like this, on the top level, and similarly on the lower level, you get the same thing, it's the same element, which gives a sort of giant order to this space. The alternative would have been, of course, to put the column back into the slab, and then have lost a little bit of play of the volume, which is reinforced by this structure. Anthony Hunt was the structural engineer on this job, and we worked very closely with our engineers on all our jobs, in fact, both on the earlier ones, Forest Gate and Holloway, and Clifton Cannon Lee. I think that Holloway is Samuel is, and Forest Gate likewise. And on this job we worked with Anthony Hunt, and we find that working very closely with him right from the very beginning on the structure is a very positive way of evolving a system which is both economic and informative. Again, there's the finished house, and there's the elements of the construction with the drum, which was hoisted into position by an enormous crane from the back here somewhere, and dropped through this semicircular sleeve, and into which then were inserted these doors, which go into these openings, and then the cladding is bolted to the steel angles, and the doors bolted to the similar angles which are turned down to receive them, forming a kind of theoretic connection of the slab behind, like that. And that is continued round the whole of the first floor, and also at the top you get similar kind of detail. There on the right is the building in pieces, as it were, and here it is finished. In that one on the right, we were experimenting with colour, and I think it's very difficult to work out a system of colour, actually. I don't think it's really very satisfactory somehow, until we evolved a technique in a rather primitive way, which is exhibited in the final result. We opted for rather simple analogies to the nature around. Therefore, the structure was painted this green colour. The floor was a kind of terracotta brown, pale terracotta brown, and the blinds, being analogous to the sky, were pale blue. And the blinds to the bedrooms down below were dark blue. I have no theory about it. It just seemed a convenient way to make some combination of colours which were sympathetic. There's this pine tree from inside. The blind system at that stage was still hooked onto the bottom of the glazing. In fact, subsequently they weighted, and they go up and down on the basis of gravity. You just lift the weight and the blind goes down. And this is the view from the kitchen area, with the drum from the bedroom below, and the living area, which looks out towards the estuary. That's looking down onto the play space below, with the spiral staircase connecting the upper level and the lower one. And you can see the louvers at the bottom here, which are paired on the other side. The staircase is also GRP, made by the same manufacturer as did the panels, and is a standard staircase, all but the top, designed by Dominic Michaelis, who evolved these treads which connect with a bolt system. And we modified it slightly insofar as we designed the landings to accommodate it. And the same firm made the cladding panels and the drum. There's two more. That's a shot of the bed space opened up in its kind of daytime use, slightly underfurnished at the moment, with the louvers open, and the connection up to the upper level. And that's a repeat, really, of the other shot you saw. That's looking back up and towards the drive. The problem with a spiral staircase, one finds always, is a wretched balustrade. And I have a kind of objection to a plethora of uprights which connect onto the leaves of the tread. And fortunately we had an understanding client who said that he would accept a much more ephemeral system. And we have just one upright here, which allows one to take the balustrade round in one sweep from the top right the way down to the bottom. We were very fortunate on this job because both the main contractor and the subcontractors concerned were all relatively small firms, and were able to give a lot of personal kind of care to the detailing, and even in some cases were able to refine on certain gestures we'd made ourselves. I don't know if it is possible to see here, but for example, I mean, it's a tiny little thing, we think, but it gives me an end of pleasure that this little thing up there, that bracket for the baluster, is arranged to allow the baluster to project something like 1/16 of an inch higher than the bracket, and that is milled off, done without any request from our part, because they just thought it looked better, and it does. It's a great asset, I think. Little thing like that. Yeah. That's a shot from the top, down the staircase. That's another one from the staircase from the front. Can you focus that one? One of the pleasures of this site is the way in which you can open the roof up in the evening and put the lights on outside and look at the garden. Then becomes the enclosure, because it's entirely wooded to form a space, and this creates the illusion of being in a very big room, you know, and you look out and see the foliage lit up. It also has a nice extra plus. There's a lot of bird life. I mean, the normal bird life around, and other kinds of flora and fauna which make enrich the house. Those are just a couple of details of the connections of the roof to the cladding. And you can see that the rather rudimentary blind connection as it was then, before it was finalised. Well, that's the end of the Pillwood house. As I say, it was designed primarily as a holiday home, not to be used all the year round. It is not a solar house. It hasn't such advantage of sunshine is really minimal. I mean, we have concrete floors, and there's some benefit from the sun penetration, but it wasn't designed around their premise. That doesn't mean to say we've got an objection to that, but just in this instance, it wasn't a consideration. The one thing that we were rather concerned about was whether, in fact, it would work as one is constantly told that the problem of heat gain and so on. But in fact, the distribution of the louvers and the blinds allows enough variation to maintain an agreeable temperature within the spaces. I don't think it would be possible to live in it all year round without additional heating. No. Now, I'll go on to the next job is Melrose Avenue. Where I find it. Yes. Can you focus it? This is a job we did in Milton Keynes. It was completed about the same time as the house, and it's built in a post-war housing estate, which you can see bits of it indicated on this site plan. It's a steel frame building which has got I think nine columns, and the roof thereby encloses the whole volume. The roof coming up to this line here, which is the sort of envelope of the space. This is a communal area, a hall, collective use. This is a playgroup area. This is an entrance. This is a workshop. And these are various ancillaries, kitchens, lockers, and so on. Again, the building can be entered in a number of places. And as we said earlier, these elements actually create the communal area by their position in relationship to the structure. It's a very simple plan. But I sometimes think that one gets over-complex with one's plans, and maybe there's an argument for a certain amount of simple proposition about the general arrangement of parts, in order that you can develop the detail in a more complex way. On the right is the axisymmetric of the structure, which is a tubular steel system, which we designed in conjunction with Samuelis. It's about 1.5 inch square tube system, metre square grid, and was assembled on site after being made in the factory, pre-painted, and lifted into position by these 4 cranes. And in it you can see the ghost, as it were, of this private accommodation, of the supporting accommodation, which is indicated by secondary steel members which engage the glazing, both around the perimeters and also around the as clerestories around these blocks. That's a shot of it just being let drop down. It was amazingly accurate considering the difficulty that one would expect, but I think there was only something like half an inch deflection on that right-hand corner. Even so, that was sufficient to merit jacking that end up. On the right, you see the node of the structure, the column, and the cap of the column, which has bolt connections to its neighbours. Each of the 2 metre square elements, of which this is one, was made separately and bolted together on the diagonal. And the structure runs actually diagonal to the plan. And one of the big pleasures of the building is the play of the diagonal with the orthogonal system, and the way the two interpenetrate and give a certain richness to the detail. This Michelangelo character on the right here, lowering the top over the column, and here's a rainwater pipe which was pre-made inside the structure and connects finally onto the roof. The photograph on the left is a shot of the play space, and on the left, and one of the entrances. We used on this job entirely, I think, well, as much as possible, industrial products. One couldn't be as rigorous as one liked because of cost, but we managed to use these perforated screens for the enclosure, which we thought would be more amusing for the children rather than the kind of thing that one finds so often, chicken wire and stuff. And I think originally they started life as, the firm that makes them, as for sifting grain. The material is for use for that. What? What?
Is the sweater on
The sweater? That's, I suppose you'd say that was on the diagonal, if you take his torso as being orthogonal. There's a couple of shots of the outside elements. We used, on this job, we used these kind of simple containers, storage, which project beyond the surface of the building by a metre. You can see on the right the same thing occurring here. And they act like bookends, as it were, to the space and contain it. And the roof overhangs the wall system by, I think, 2 metres. There's further shots of it. You're beginning now to see the game I was referring to, the play of the orthogonal system, and the diagonal which penetrates through on at these node points. The panel system in this job was glass reinforced concrete panels with a foam insulation, which are slightly pearly finish. They look a bit flat on this, but they have a slight mottle as a result of the fiberglass, I think, interacting with the concrete. And they are, I think, about 4 inches thick, something of that sort, 100 millimeters. This play I was talking about earlier, here you have the structural system with its 1.5 inch or inch and a quarter, I think, maybe square bars. And that would be a unit, that piece there. It's built on its companion. And the checkerboard makes up the spaces between, as it were. That's made up of a piece like that, a piece like this, and so on. And it's built together on the ground and knit in position. And into this is threaded the secondary steels, which are T-sections, which you can just about see, I think, on that drawing here, which penetrate through the diagonal system and afford a method of connection for the panels. As per the drawing, the photograph on the right. This idea was a way in which the structure actually penetrated the skin of the building and continued through it, through the space, and was detached thereby from the more empirical divisions inside it. We put the corrugated roof deck also on the diagonal to reinforce this proposition. The lighting also runs the same way, also on the diagonal. We have a lot of battles with our service engineers, bless their hearts, to try and get them to make their lighting go in the way that one would like. Is always a difficulty. They would prefer to have a random system, or a system to suit the individual space. And we wanted to get the lighting on a sort of universal basis that ran consistently through the whole structural system. That's a shot of one of these office stroke stores on the right, and that's the common space before it was finished. It was taken before the floors were laid and the furniture in. We borrowed some children, at least the corporation did. Now here you see the penetration of the lighting I referred to, and the kind of complexity of detail in relation to the simplicity of the plan, which means that it's a building that it's more engaging the closer you get to it, in fact. Whereas so often one finds it's the other way around. With modern buildings, very often it's at a distance that they're engaging. When you approach them, there's a certain amount of disappointment. The photograph on the right is also quite interesting, apropos of what we were saying earlier about the way in which a contractor can be engaged to participate in the design, if tackled the right way. We wanted to make a sign for the building which was compatible with its attitude to the steel and elements and so on. And we evolved this strip of steel which was bent and welded together, and engaged the contractor in a very useful way. He was very productive over this particular thing because it meant he was actually engaged as a craftsman, or his men were, and it was something which they enjoyed doing. And I think, so that rather sort of abrupt note, that's as much as I have on this, on Melrose Avenue, and also it's to date the amount of work which we've actually built, or most of it anyway, and we currently we're engaged in some housing projects, which we won't show you tonight because it requires too much time. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? We'll endeavour to do our best to answer them.
How is this Melrose Centre ventilated and heated?
It's ventilated by naturally around the perimeter here there are louvered panels in this tapestry which give you through ventilation to the halls, and it's heated by industrial blows, electrical blows.
John, how do you respond to the critique which was done in Article de Rodri on the universal space thing, that this building could as well be church, supermarket, car park, a children's playground, and so on? And how do you respond to that critique? I mean, is that your intention?
Well, I mean, if I were to show you a photograph of a village hall around circa 1910, I think the same comment could be made. You know, very similar comment could be made. You know, it's a communal space, could be used in a number of ways. If you mean that the industrial aesthetic perhaps extends the propositions outside those limited by the kind of function we're indicating, I mean, it's possibly so. Do you mean that, do you? In fact, one is using
but even
machine
going down to
aesthetic.
this detail where the lighting becomes not individual for a room but for a system, and where it could really read anything, but it's really not specified typologically what it is.
It's specific to a building.
Well, it's
And the building, the thing is that the attempt is to make the building have two readings. One is a reading as a total space, and the other is a reading in which the space is broken up into different compartments or different space compartments. As to the question of character, it seems to me that I don't really see that you can base a critique of architecture based on the idea of character. I mean, most of the examples of traditional architecture up till the 19th century were quite alien to the notion of character. In the ancient world, you had buildings which were generally formally very similar and performed different functions. And
character
in the
might
classical...
be 19th century category, but still it expresses what is specific to a specific building.
Yes, but it's not a necessary presupposition for architecture. It's a presupposition. It's a presupposition, but it's not necessary. And it's one that existed for a short period of time in the 19th century. And I don't think it's necessarily a virtue. But every building should have its... I mean, this is like getting like the duck, isn't it?
Like what?
It's like Bob Venturi's duck, that every building has to be what it has to look like what it is. Which I think is an absurd
That's
proposition.
what we're doing it in a superficial way.
Well, no, the duck was an analogy that he made. I mean, it was a joke analogy.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, I agree with this proposition that it's not necessarily a good thing to make, or even possible to make every building somehow inherently express its inner nature. For one thing, I think that the different functions that buildings have are rather ephemeral. They don't last that long.
Yes, that's true.
And I mean, one of the most interesting ideas that's come out recently, I think, is the rationalist idea that buildings can be used for different purposes, and the more successful buildings.
Because they actually are.
And yeah, but the ones that are more successful at doing that are the ones that were not designed from the point of view of character in the first place.
You know, I think it is another issue a little bit, and I think one could make criticism of Melrose, but a public building which doesn't really have a public expression, which is not so much the question of character, specific character, but the question of technology of the building tends a little bit towards compromising the public status of the building, which I think is not quite the same thing as specific code.
Well, I mean, the difference between you and Leo is that Leo is saying that every building should look like what it is, and you're saying that certain categories of buildings should look like what they are, i.e. public buildings versus private buildings. I'd like to know how you would define the formal properties of a public building.
Well, I think what's a little problematic in Melrose is the dominance of the structure and the slight conflict, I think, between a very elegant structure which dominates the composition and the question of entry. I've always felt about it that the entry is a little critical.
Vague.
Yes, and the structure is so universal that there is this kind of impossible problem posed almost of the universal structure and the public nature of the building. I think that problem occurs a lot with modern technology.
I mean, as I say, that's one of the issues, I think, when you engage in a building which is to do with steel structures of that sort. You know, it tends to put a high priority on the ingenuity and aesthetic of steel, of the structure, and a low premium on the interface is what you're talking about.
Yes, but I think the reason we chose the steel structure, and I think we did it for a very good reason. I mean, it's very similar to Bill Wood and in a way Holloway College, in the sense that all those three buildings are considered as pavilions. And in fact, that is what they were. I mean, certainly Holloway College and Melrose Avenue were set in sites where the space flowed equally around all the sides, and therefore their very nature, the site, determined that they should be pavilions. And one of the characteristics of the Melrose site is that it's one of the most depressing of modern suburban sites you could imagine. It's full of sort of 1950s semi-debts, and there's absolutely no feeling of public realm about it. It's a kind of total affront to the whole idea of the public realm. And we wanted to, in order to overcome this disadvantage which the site had, we felt that we had to make a very positive statement about this building as a pavilion, which was differentiating itself from its surroundings. And one of the ways we thought we would do this is by creating this structural system and turning the building into a pavilion. One admits that obviously if you make those decisions, certain other things follow, like certain indefiniteness about entrances and things like that. But an alternative solution, for instance, in which the parts were more articulated, would, I think, and I think John agrees, would have produced a building which was much smaller in scale than the one we've done. I mean, the attempt was to make a very small building into something important in that very, very negative, in those very negative surroundings. And the emphasis on the square and on the structure, which emphasizes the total space of the building, is a very definite decision in order to achieve that. And I'd still like to know, Ken, how would you define the formal properties of a public building?
Well,
what are the things that make a building public and not public?
Well, I think the leftover space adjacent to Melrose and the way one passes through it to get to the building seem to me to be insufficiently celebrated in balancing out against the structure. And I feel the last shot, for example, which shows the lettering on the fence, I feel reinforces a certain anxiety about that, about the question of announcing what is the public entry. And I think I accept what you just said, but I still think that if you wanted to put a public building on a site which is so critical, then I think there was something that ought to have been added to it to emphasize the threshold of the building. To emphasize
yes. And I would accept that. The one modification to that I would make is that
there's a contextual problem, you know. So often in these post-war housing estates, you get residual space between the housing and the road. It's not a street. There's no structuring which can anticipate the kind of thing you're talking about, you know.